Okay, hello everyone. This is the third descheduling meeting. The last one was cancelled due to the KubeCon, but here we are, just two, me and Mike. I would also like to remind both of us to follow the code of conduct in this meeting. So, given the audience on the call, we decided to just share a few news or information about the descheduling framework. Just like going very quickly through topics, we decided to postpone those two topics to the next meeting. So people just go through descheduling framework changes, just those two PRs. I will start with the first one and about the conversion from V1 Alpha 1 to V1 Alpha 2 as part of migrating to the descheduling framework. I need to make sure that we properly convert the V1 Alpha 1 descheduler policy to the V1 Alpha 2 is made of profiles. And Lucas started to implement the change. There's an upstream issue reported for it, number 926, where you can read more about it. But in short, the idea is to use the schemes and conversion generated by the generators to like cleanly convert the V1 Alpha 1 to V1 Alpha 2. But the change is quite big because it's touching a lot of parts. As you can see, like there's a lot of files getting changed in the process, and I hope the font is big enough. And it's, even though it's still a work in progress PR, there's a lot of changes. I'm moving the code around, and given the scope of the changes, it might be quite hard to do like a proper review and catch all the like missing or corner cases. So if you are interested in knowing like what's happening currently in the PR, just take a look. But like in short, we're just trying to introduce or Lucas is introducing the V1 Alpha 2 type, then updating the code which is responsible for reading the policy file, then converting it into V1 Alpha 2. At the same time, we need to access the profile arguments, which are of its own type as well inside the plugin packages. And in order to connect all the pieces, we need to register the types of the arguments as well. So it's a kind of not easy to see all the changes, how they are changing the code, and if the changes are still producing a functioning code. So before we move on with this PR, it would be great to update the code a bit so we can minimize the changes in this PR and to primarily focus only on the conversion. So I've opened another PR, which is preparing the code for it. And so I will just go quickly through the changes so I can explain what they are intended to do, which hopefully will help with the review. And once this PR is merged, then we can focus on the conversion and then move on. So right now, the code is still relying on the strategies. We have a list of hard-coded strategies in the main descheduling loop. And it will be so easy to follow the changes, but if you bear with me, I will try to explain as much as I can. So just in short, in order to ease the transition, the ultimate goal is to read the V1 Alpha 2 configuration, then get a list of plugins which are enabled, get a configuration for each plugin, then build or construct the plugins, and then run the plugins in a specific order. So in order to get that, I'm just updating the code the way that we prepare a list of enabled plugins for both the schedule and balance extension point. So it looks like the final state of the code, but like just you can see that at the end we are going through all the enabled DESCHEDULE extension points and just invoking the DESCHEDULE method of each plugin. The same for the balance plugin, and the rest of the changes are just like trying to, instead of invoking the plugins directly, we are just building the plugins and basically returning the plugins and invoking the DESCHEDULE and balance right after it. So it's like more or less just doing this. So again, at the end, you can see that we are kind of already invoking the individual extension points the way it should more or less be. That's the first commit. If we take a look at the other one, that part is actually now to take the part which is responsible for converting the V1 alpha 1 strategy parameters into the V1 alpha 2 arguments. So now in the updated code, there's a new map, which is just here for when we specify the strategy name. We pass in the strategy parameters, and we return the configuration of the plugin with its arguments. Again, it's quite straightforward because we already have the code responsible for translating or converting the V1 alpha 2 parameters into V1 alpha 2 arguments. So again, just this. And the rest of the code which was removed, like the part responsible for building the plugins, was moved or kept in the original map. So when we access this, we already get the this is more or less the to be plugin registry builder, right? So now we have the part responsible for converting the strategy parameters into plugin arguments. Like it's still in the main discussion loop, but it's separated from the code which is responsible for building the plugins. Now, yeah, any question?
So I was just trying to catch up on this. Could you just explain what the difference between this and it looked like Lucas had mentioned the conversion funcs that he had in his PR. Could you just kind of draw out what that difference is and how this is better?
Yeah. So this is actually not a replacement for Lucas' code. It's just like a simplification of the code. So when Lucas updates his PR, hopefully he will, then it will only touch the part of the code that's responsible for converting the parameters to arguments and to nothing else. Because right now the Lucas PR has the changes which are updating the conversion, the changes which are building the plugins, and the changes which are running the plugins, which kind of were not supposed to be part of resolving the issue, but given the code is still like in this mess state, he basically had to perform those changes as well.
All right, so this is kind of pulling out some of the changes that he was doing to make that PR a little easier and make these overall changes just easier
Right.
to follow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to see, I guess he's got his PR still needs a rebase, right? And it'll have to come after this too. I wish that I could see his PR without the parts that this affects, so that I could kind of follow through them. I don't know if he'll have time to make that update or just like rebase off of your branch, but I guess that's just kind of the part that I'm having trouble just from like the surface level, trying to see where this fits in.
Yeah, that was actually one of the reasons why I'm trying to simplify the code, because like there's quite a lot of changes which are not easy to follow, and the actually the reason why it is complicated is because like there's a lot of changes needed to perform to in order to keep or to preserve the original functionality of the descheduler. So like Lucas was performing those changes incrementally, but like given the nature of that, it's like a bit hard to actually keep the flow and to see all the changes like in one mind.
So I see that you are also adding in like the profile and the plugins and everything. You're just adding those to the V1 Alpha 1 types, or not just the central types?
Yeah, so I will, so yeah, so if you take a look at the pull commit, that's what I'm doing.
Right,
so right. I try to minimize the changes which are needed in Lucas PR, and it turned out like to be actually better to introduce the new types in this PR and like kind of make a hacky or like hacky solution for converting the V1 Alpha 1 to V1 Alpha 2, but like make it like in a small steps. So
yeah, and he'll use these types once this merges and then his PR updates to follow this, like adding in the V1 Alpha 2, and the conversion will be using these central types anyway, so he's going to need them.
Right. So I will get to, so I left a comment in this PR, which is actually a place where he may actually like take a baseline for continuing his work. So here again, so right here, I basically move the code, which is responsible for specifying or converting the strategy params to arguments like a further. So the original code like had this part which defines the default vector arguments. Also, the other parts which are building the filter, the handler, and so on. So these pieces like got moved later in the code. So right now in the first loop, we are actually just building the profiles, just like, again, quite simply. So we just keep, so actually this code got moved a few lines down in here. So it's still kept here. But at the same time, like we are already building the plugin configs, which is part of the profile. And because like each strategic right now corresponds to one profile, we are just extending the plugin config for that like converted strategy params. And then because we know the name of the strategy or the corresponding plugin, we like make it enabled. So we are kind of like doing like like already the conversion from the params to profiles. So it's like a bit obvious how it's done. And then basically the code which was originally removed. The one responsible for building the default evictor, the filter, and the enders are moved like to another loop. So we have actually now two loops. The first loop responsible for converting the params into profiles, and the other loop which just builds the filter, the handler, and the plugins basically.
So is this making a separate profile for each strategy?
Yeah, it is.
Is there a reason that we need to do that instead of just converting every, like if someone had, what I imagined a V1 alpha 1 to 2 conversion would be like, V1 alpha 1 is pretty much inherently right now one profile, and just drop that whole thing into one other profile. Is there a reason that we need to do them in separate profiles?
Yes, so the reason is the, for example, this option. If I'm, so, okay, let me check the documentation. Should be, right, so for each strategy, you can specify like the threshold parity or threshold parity class name. So basically each strategy can have different value for this parameter. But because each profile has its own default evictor or the evictor filter, then you cannot have the, so having all the strategies in the same profile would mean it would actually force you to have the identical configuration or value for both threshold parity and threshold parity class name.
Yeah, so we took, what we basically did was take the, like these evictor settings that were strategy specific, and we basically moved them up a level to be profile specific. Yeah. Okay, I guess that makes sense. I think that's just a good like distinction to call out to people. Would be, you know, good to show that now these kinds of settings are moving up a level, and you control them over a set of plugins by using that profile. But that makes sense that we have to do it that way in the conversion.
Yeah, like I wished I'd be like better in describing the reasoning behind it. I kind of maybe did that in the design proposal, or maybe I forgot about it. I don't know.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just you know, I didn't think so much about how like profiles now are really kind of anchored in the evictor. The evictor kind of defines at least a lot of the profiles settings. I think that will be useful for people to know.
Like when we like write the documentation for the new descheduling framework, I will make sure that it's like properly explained there why it was done this way.
Yeah, well, I think it's a cool way to do it too, and more useful than the other way, having to copy settings and stuff.
Yeah.
But thank you for answering that.
Yeah. And so basically the other loop is responsible like for building the bits which are needed for each plugin to initialize. So and like in this PR, there is like the clear separation between the part which is responsible for converting the params into arguments, and the other part which is responsible for actually building the plugins. And there is the last part which is responsible for executing the extension points or of the plugins. And again, like this part will then in the next commit will get moved closer to the conversion code. And in the future, this part like of the building plugins will get moved closer to the plugin a registry and so on. And like this part for running the extension points will basically stay in the main loop, but like will get enriched with the framework handlers and for collecting metrics and other useful handlers. And
Yeah.
basically, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I like that this is
Okay.
moving a lot more towards an abstract approach in that descheduler.go file versus having like the kind of hard-coded plugin settings. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
mean.
yeah. And the rest of the changes are basically just made to make this happen.
So that one is interesting there, the plugin to extension points map. That's just a migration thing, right? We're eventually
Yeah.
going to have, it will just be able to detect by like casting or, trying to do something to tell if it's a descheduler or a balance plugin. Is that right?
So this will be needed for the V1 Alpha 1 conversion to 2, because the in the strategies we do not know like which extension point is to be like assigned to each strategy.
Right. Yeah, and then you can't just cast. Yeah, you can't cast V1 Alpha 1 to be like a descheduler or a deschedule plugin because it doesn't implement that in V1 Alpha 1.
Yeah, yeah.
But once everything's migrated to V1 Alpha 2 and new plugins that are written after this will be able to. Yeah, I think that we should be able to do something with that. That part is interesting to me, but I got to look a little bit more at it. And I'm sure you've thought about it a whole bunch too. So
Yeah, like when the plugin builder gets implemented, there's going to be a code responsible for detecting which extension points are available based on the casting. So, but that's going to be done for the V1 Alpha 2 or like for the plugins. This is just a like an unfortunate hack to allow like clean migration from strategies to plugins.
yeah, but yeah, eventually, all of our internal strategies they will implement those endpoints, and so we should be able to just, the code shouldn't have to, like we were talking about, know whether this plugin was written as like an Alpha 1 plugin or an Alpha 2 plugin. They're just
Yeah,
all plugins that need to implement that, so we should be able to find it. Maybe
yep.
as part of like, the plugin builder, the registry you'll pass like the object to it for that plugin to like an instantiator.
Yeah, yeah, and like it will be also needed to like for the out of tree plugins. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like the whole idea of out of tree plugins here is that we're building ours to be just like an out of tree plugin, like no real difference,
Yeah,
just to make the code base more manageable.
yep. So then in this commit, I just moved like the all the code which is like bound to the code responsible for converting the params into arguments from the main descheduler code into. Okay, not yet. So I just moved the code like into a function which can be like which is a closed function which can be then moved outside of this this file and move closer to the conversion. So this is just moving the code like those 3 places into one place, and that's it. So that's just that. And the last commit is responsible for actually. So here I'm already removing the V1 Alpha 1 fields from the disclosure policy and making like it a V1 Alpha 2 or like in other words, like the original internal type of the deschedule policy was v1 alpha 1, but now it's v1 alpha 2.
Yeah,
And
and that's fine because we don't have to like we don't have to be able to round trip. If we had to be able to say like round trip between the versions, and someone that sets up a v1 alpha 1 needs to be able to get back their v1 alpha 1, we'd have to keep those. But we're the only thing that's consuming this, and we don't print the config at all, or it's
yeah,
not a API object, so we don't need to do that.
yeah, exactly. And like given that the only place where the conversion was actually used was in the in the policy config where we're loading the policy, which
Yep.
was here, then we kept like both types in sync, so we can just like without any loss of anything to just swap it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the most important part, which basically like under the hood, like this function does the conversion from v1 alpha 1 to v1 alpha 2, but like it's just the code actually which I like displayed in the previous commit.
Yeah.
So I'm just moving the function from the descheduler.go file from the main loop here, and if everything go fine, then goes fine, then this is the only function that needs to be replaced by Lucas with some like additional schemes and registering schemes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So you're doing it basically like kind of brute forcing through it, but he's going to add in like the like change it to the scheme conversion like that was above.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's really what it should do. Is well, we should be first off. How do you tell the difference between if the policy is being passed in as v1 alpha 1 or v1 alpha 2? What if you pass a v1 alpha 2?
So
Oh.
right now we still do not allow to pass the v1 alpha 2. It's just like this option is not available for anyone, and that will be actually up to Lucas to decide what to do about it. But like
Okay.
he already implemented this part of the code in his PR, so
Right.
like he advanced in this area a lot.
Okay.
So like this will all go away hopefully, and it will look nicer and prettier. And the rest is just the changes that were needed to actually make the swap between the internal v1 alpha 1 to the v1 alpha 1 types, and yeah, and the changes in the deschedule were just moving the code around, removing the pieces which are no longer needed, so we have a cleaner code. And if you just take a look in the final code, and you can see that like most of the code just got removed, dropped, and we have only one main loop. And yeah, it's actually hard to see it in here, but yeah, I think I just yeah, I didn't see the go to codes. So anyway, you will need to be limited. The code got simplified, and you're going to take a look at the PR. So yeah, that's more or less what this PR is about. And once this get reviewed and merged, then we can follow with Lucas PR.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, looks good. I'll take a look at it and try to have some comments in if there's anything that I don't see. But um, I think that this is a good idea to have like an incremental step between this and Lucas's. So anything that gets us further progress is good.
Yeah, like I hopefully this will minimize the aerospace that like things we might just not see or just like ignore, and hopefully it will not break. anything?
Yeah, it like on the surface, it seems like it's all straightforward. We're just kind of moving code around stuff, but you never know like what
Yeah.
kind of thing, like a wire that gets dropped, and suddenly like no settings are
Yeah.
getting passed through to certain strategies. Kind of like on the with the logging uh, thing, where it looked like a pretty straight up refactor for bumping it, and um, ended up
Yeah.
not passing the logging settings through at all.
Yeah. It's like it seems like it gets broken with every rebase, and something like this always like omitted, or we don't know about it, and then it breaks. And
Yeah, and I don't think that like that's no one's fault. We didn't have any way to test for that, so I
yeah.
don't know how we test for things like making sure that the logging flags still work. I'm glad that we found it, but that would be good to if anyone could work on that.
Yeah, like I hope that like after the descheduling framework is more or less finished, then we will have more time to deal with the everything else. It's
Yeah,
like at this stage, it's a bit like fragile to rebase the PR, because the code changes a lot during the
yep,
refactoring, and
yep. It's all really up in the air, but hopefully it all settles down, and and the ideal is that all the code is much nicer organized, and everything wires through fewer spots through these like abstract endpoints, so that checking where settings are getting passed is a lot easier, and not so many disjoint
yeah.
strategy codes and things. But um, a lot of good work on it, and we have 1,000 PRs now.
Yeah.
Good
1,000.
milestone.
Yeah, that's we should
Uh,
celebrate it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like with that, like thank you everyone who contributed to the project. It's like it's been a wild ride since the beginning. So thanks everyone, and hopefully we will soon hit the 2,000 number of the PR.
Hopefully, not all bug fixes.
Yeah, that's true. So all right, let's keep the topics for the next meeting in 2 weeks. And thank you everyone for joining, and talk to you next time.
I
Okay.
just went on camera because it was too awkward when there's only two people for me to
Oh,
stare at the screen.
oh, then thank you for joining, Brian. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you for running it. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye, guys.
See ya.
Okay. I guess Mike, enjoy the rest of your day, and
Yeah, you too. Looks like still recording.
it is, or